And he was such a wonderful guy. He was an old Greek guy, and
Old soul.
his father was a master boat builder, and he had been the captain of a boat since he was 12 years old. And he was a wonderful guy. But anyway, I finally got him one day to give me the readings for a special place where Pete and I could go and dive. And so anyway, the name of this spot was a Sturgeon, and it was east of Destin, about 10 or 12 miles.
Yeah.
And not too far offshore. The shore was very visible. So anyway, Pete and I had, on the boat, I had my uncle and a friend of his, Gene Wesley and Uncle Olin were on the boat. And so we drive up, and the bottom machine is just going crazy with all the definition on the bottom and all the marine life and everything. So Pete and I suit up, and Pete was, we called him the stringer. I had a pole spear with a pole spear is just a long fiberglass rod with a point on the end of it and a piece of surgical tubing, and you put your hand in the surgical tubing and run it down and you use that as a spear. And so Pete was the stringer. The stringer had a fiberglass rod about that long with a point on the end of it, but it had a long coated cable on the end of it with a loop so that you could stick the point through the fish's gill and then slide them down.
6 feet of cable on the 6 feet of cable on that strap. And I was a stringer because I was a novice diver. I mean, I hadn't dove a dozen times after my checkout dive. I mean, I had just, it was probably 3 or 4 days after their honeymoon and I arrived. So anyway.
Well, and I was the stringer before that, because I was the woman.
Well, and one of the things that you have to understand is once you start killing fish on a reef, you really have to move along pretty quickly, because after you kill 4 or 5, they leave.
Absolutely.
So I was adamant to these guys about as soon as I speared the fish, while I was taking the spear point had wings on it so that you couldn't put it back out. So you had to push it on through and lock those wings before you could pull it out.
Well, anyway, come on, let's go walk on the water.
And I had really impressed on these guys that they needed, as soon as I speared that fish, I wanted them right there in putting that spear, that stringer, so that we could move along. Well, we go down on this rock, and it has to be one of the
prettiest,
most impressive dives. I've been diving almost all over the world, and this place was just awesome. It was the most beautiful place you've ever seen. The visibility that day was probably 30, 40 feet easily.
Which is good for Destin.
Yeah.
And marine life was everywhere, lobsters.
And so we had speared several fish. I don't know anything, but we had speared several fish. And I wheeled around, and up this rock was this big old black snapper or red snapper. I can't remember. I think it was a red snapper, but he was probably this big. I mean, he was a big red snapper. So I cocked my spear, and I was swimming up to him, and I let the spear go, and the spear speared him. And about that time, something hit me on my shoulder and spun me around. And my immediate response was, come on, Pete.
God damn it, Pete.
You don't have to be that eager. And when I turned,
so my job is to watch him. When he spears a fish, I'm supposed to be right there. Well, I'm watching him look for another fish, and all of a sudden this shark appears. I mean, literally 5 feet above him. And the shark is
he's going,
twice as big as Malcolm.
well, I'll tell you how big the
And
shark
so,
was.
and I'm a novice diver, and I'm thinking, well, I'm sure Malcolm saw him, and he's not worried about it. So I'm not going to say anything to him. I mean, so I'm not going to.
Whatever you say, Malcolm.
Okay,
But that shark comes after my fish, and he hits me on the shoulder and spins me around. And when I turn back around, my spear is in the fish, and he bites down on the spear, and it goes just like this. And so I thought, well,
There goes a good
and I
fish.
said, I better turn around and tell Pete there's a shark in there. So
and I'm holding the stringer.
I turned around, and there are 2 of them around Pete, doing this.
But I'm not worried, because I'm with Malcolm.
What the hell's to worry
He
about?
doesn't look worried.
So I swim over to Pete. Now, if you've ever been scuba diving, you've got a mouthful of mouthpiece.
Sounds like that.
Well, that day, he and I communicated just like we're talking today. And how we did, I don't know. But Pete said to me, he said, "What are we gonna do?" I said, "I don't know." But in the meantime, the shark would come straight at me. And the reason, I don't know how long he was or how big around he was, but I can tell you, his eyes were wider
dog.
apart than my body was.
Oh, shit, man.
And he would come
How
up
tall
to
are
me.
you, Malcolm?
Huh?
How tall are you?
6'3".
He was twice as long as you.
Well, they were bull sharks.
And there were 3 of them.
Yeah, there were 3 of them. And the shark would
It was a
come
bull shark.
swimming.
Bull shark.
Uh-huh.
He would come swimming at me, and I'd take my fist and bop him in the nose, and he'd turn around and run off. And then I don't know if it was the same one or a different one came. I did this maybe 6 times.
And they were coming up to me, too.
Well, they
yeah, they were.
They finally got back to
Back
back.
to
I don't
back.
know how they communicated, but they got back to
back
back.
to back.
So that
But-
Pete
but-
was beating them off from his direction, and Malcolm was beating them off.
And so,
direction.
so Pete says, "What now?" And I said, I think what they want is the stringer.
You think?
So I said, let's ease up off the bottom 15 or 20 feet. And when I tell you, you drop the stringer, and when you drop the stringer, we're going to the surface. And so,
And all this is
And so we do that,
All this
and
is
Malcolm
like,
says, drop it. Well, I'm a novice diver. I want to try and save the fish if I can. So I hold on to the end of the stringer, and I let the cable and the fish go. Well, as close as me to Malcolm, 2 of those 12-foot sharks come, and they start going after those fish on the stringer,
Oh.
just
Then
like
you
they
let 'em
see
go,
on
right?
TV. I said, okay, let's go.
We're done.
Take it.
Out of here.
and so
Take it and welcome.
we're going up now. You have to be careful when you're in that depth, because we were about
can't go-
110
yeah, you
feet.
You know, 80
there.
feet, 80
You
feet.
can't go fast.
80 feet.
Can't go too fast.
No.
But anyway, we
Safety
were
stops
pretty
fast as you
deep.
can in the surface.
So we
You
start
get the
up,
bends.
and
You have to stop.
you have to ascend so that you won't hurt yourself in your ascent.
Slow.
And the guide is you don't ascend faster
Faster
than
than your
the
bubble.
The smallest bubble. Right.
Yeah.
That was bullshit that day.
I bet Pete hit the water and went,
When we got to the surface, the joke after all this was that when Malcolm broke the surface, he said, "Throw me the boat."
Malcolm jumped in the boat. He
And
said,
so the boat comes up, and the gunnel on the Triton back then was probably two
Yeah.
2.5 feet,
Yeah.
3 feet max.
Yeah.
Malcolm comes, he's got his fins and his tank and everything on. He
BC.
comes, he kicks and grabs and comes out of the water into the boat,
All in one
all
moment.
in one.
You levitated. You levitated.
Me,
right,
I'm the
levitated.
novice.
The novice.
I mean, I hang onto the boat and I untangle unstrap my tank and I'm handing it up for them to
Like
bring
we
it in.
do.
And
Finally, I
finally get in
said,
the
"Pete, get your ass out of the water."
Shark, there are 3 sharks down there.
God, dog.
And then
Okay.
my only thought, once I got back on the boat, was if something had happened, I wondered who would have called Linda.
Well, so I had only been married for 1 week. And here was Pete and Malcolm and
Did you go out and buy him some good insurance right after that?
I bet so, man.
well, when they came home, they drank and they drank
We
and they drank and I went,
really got shit faced.
they didn't have a good day.
I
at all.
remember
And-
calling
and
me.
no
I thought,
fish.
do you have all your legs and arms? I was like,
The next
We were
day,
just
we
dating.
told Captain Nick about that, and he said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Said, yeah, they're usually right there." And I said, "Captain Nick, why didn't you tell me something about it?"
I could have told you that. They're there every time I go.